to diversity or lack thereof in the field of AI. We believe that diversity considerations need to be an integral part of all aspects of AI, including development, research, application, and evaluation of new AI technologies. Our goal with this Remarkable Women in AI series is to inspire all genders and encourage each and every one of you to consider specific steps you can take in your respective roles to address the gender gap in AI. To that end, we've set up the Remarkable Women in AI initiative as a series of inspirational, educational, collaborative, and global discussions on gender diversity in AI. The first two sessions of the series are virtual, with a goal of putting the spotlight on AI innovators and role models, and to hear about their successes and their learnings, and to inspire attendees to take action. The last two sessions are cross-cultural and hybrid, with a focus on actionable insights for accelerating change. In these sessions, attendees will come together in person in at least 2 locations in the world for the opportunity to share their experiences across thousands of miles between Berlin and San Francisco and between Munich and Singapore. We're especially excited because in addition to the phenomenal group of panelists we have here today, we have an exciting lineup of speakers coming up in the future sessions of the series, including Dr. Anna Christmann, a member of the German Parliament and a leading voice in politics for women in tech and AI, as well as women AI leaders from organizations such as Google, Intel, Merantix, the AI Association in Germany, and many others. So we hope you'll be able to join us for the whole series, and please mark your calendars as you can see the dates here. Feel free also to scan the QR code to get access to the sign-up sheets. With that, and without further ado, it is my great pleasure to kick off this series by introducing our moderator, Dr. Caroline Simard, the Managing Director at the Stanford VMware Women's Leadership Innovation Lab. Caroline is responsible for the execution of the research agenda, business operations, and people management for the lab. She's passionate about building better workplaces for women through evidence-based solutions, and we're very fortunate to have her today and to be able to hear from her about 20 years of research she's conducted on the topic of diversity. So with that, welcome Caroline and all of our speakers.
Thank you so much, Heidi. And while there's certainly not enough time to cover 20 years of research in our time briefly this morning, I really appreciate the opportunity to kind of set the stage for this conversation, but then really turn the spotlight on this incredible panel of AI innovators. I did ask myself when I was asked to moderate this session, I did reflect on 20 years in this space of increasing the representation of women in STEM and leadership roles. And I asked myself, why am I still excited to moderate a panel of women in tech? Right? I dream of a day where the participation of all genders is so normalized, right, that we do not need to have a specific conversation surrounding women in tech or in AI. Unfortunately, we're not there yet. We're very far from that goal. And the reality is that progress has been very elusive and is very stalled, right? So women hold 22% of AI jobs globally, an estimate. Germany has a very large gender gap, with 16% of the estimated AI talent pool being women. And across Europe, about 19% of overall technology degrees go to women. In the US, a very similar number. In Canada, where I'm from as well, about 19% of women earning computer science and information technology degrees. women in North America earn 18% of PhDs in computer science focused on AI. In 20 years, these numbers have not budged, despite significant effort on the part of many organizations. And so we may have limited a slide back with all of the efforts, but the reality is the underrepresentation and participation of women has been very persistent. And while in Europe, in the US, and Canada, our cultural contexts vary and different policy frameworks vary, we do end up with very similar statistics. Consider this research by social psychologist Sapna Cherian from the University of Washington and her colleagues. She shows that children as early as the age of 6 and well into late high school years are more likely to believe that girls are less interested than boys in computer science and engineering. The stronger this belief, the lower likelihood girls have of participating in computer science and technology activities in school settings. For boys, the reverse is true. The more they think girls are not interested, the more likely they are to participate in computer science and engineering. And what we see is these beliefs start very early and they're very pervasive. And this is the negative power of gender and societal stereotypes that really shapes who can imagine themselves in what careers, who we think belongs in what space, and also the kind of encouragement and opportunities we're going to offer people who want to enter the state. So today and throughout this series, we want to change the narrative and dismiss these harmful stereotypes. We want to center the thought leadership of prominent women in AI and issue a call to action. I firmly believe that a thriving ecosystem of AI innovation needs to design for inclusion. And so I'm going to be joined today by 4 panelists for this conversation. We have Heidi Razavi, who you heard from, who's the managing partner of German Entrepreneurship. Jocelyn Goldfein, who's managing director of Zeta Ventures. We have Leila Rebu, who's head of data science and AI solutions at NRB, the NRB group. And Kay Firth Butterfield, head of AI and machine learning and member of the executive committee of the World Economic Forum. So today you're getting to hear from voices from technical innovation, entrepreneurship, policy making, from startup to large organizations to think tanks. So this is a really powerful set of different perspectives and expertise that we have today on this panel. So let's begin. My first question to each of you is to tell us what you do and how you got into the space of leading AI innovation. And was there a defining moment, or was it the result of a career evolution? And I'm going to start with Leila.
Hello, Leila Rebu, nice to meet you. So I'm responsible of the group of artificial intelligence at NRB. It's a large IT service provider in Liège. It's a Belgian town close to Germany. My background is a PhD in physics, and my specialty was analyzing data from experimental material science. So at that time, the word of data science didn't exist, in fact. So, and I decided 10 years ago to become entrepreneur in this world of data analysis and data science. So I discovered artificial intelligence through this data science gate. And I was particularly fascinated by the data monetization aspects. So I will say my role in the artificial intelligence space is a result of a career evolution.
Thank you so much, Leila. And Kay, what about you?
Yes, well, I think mine is a result of career evolution, except my career has been very different. So I started my life as a British barrister with lawyers that wear wigs and gowns and go to court, then became a judge, hated being a judge, but had always had a career in thinking about human rights, and particularly the rights of children. And I was writing a book as a professor. So having given up being a judge, I moved into being a professor. I was writing a book on human trafficking and human rights. And my final chapter was all about artificial intelligence and what this would look like, what human rights would look like in the age of AI. That was back in 2010. And so really it was sort of when there were about, I don't know, 10 of us thinking about responsible AI and what our futures would look like. So yes, a career evolution, but how did I get to be the world's first chief AI ethics officer? That's when fate stepped in, because I was on a 10-hour flight from London to Austin, happened to sit next to the chair and CEO of a small AI startup a week after Stephen Hawking and others had said AI might be the worst thing for humanity or the best. We got talking. 10 hours later, I had a job.
What a fantastic story. And one of the takeaways here is there's more than one narrow pathway into this space and into leadership in this space, right? We often hear from young women, oh, I didn't pursue CS as an undergrad, I missed the boat, and things like that. Actually, there are so many different ways to enter and participate in this space. Jocelyn, what about you?
Maybe I do represent that one narrow pathway. I did major in computer science and work as a software engineer and then a tech executive for the first 15 or so years of my career. But what I do today is invest in startups and invest specifically in AI startups. I'm a managing director at a boutique venture capital firm called Zeta Venture Partners. The Zeta is for the Zettabyte. We focus exclusively on AI, machine learning, and infrastructure, and startups adding to that body of work and innovation. And I would say there were probably two turning points that brought my career to be really focused on AI. When I studied computer science in the late 90s, machine learning existed. You could take a class in it, but it was considered kind of a toy. And it was really the rise of cloud and the what's the opposite of skyrocketing, the plunging costs of compute and data storage that made machine learning go from this kind of impractical lab technique that couldn't accomplish very much to something that had a great deal of power. And that dawned on me when I joined Facebook in 2010, and my first big project there was adopting machine learning for the newsfeed. So in 2010, only 5 people were thinking about responsible AI, and I was out there being irresponsible. But it was incredibly clear sitting inside Facebook in 2010, probably one of 5 companies on the planet putting machine learning in production at that point in time, the power of what had been kind of esoteric and academic before that. And so later on, when I became more focused on angel investing and advising startups and thinking about venture, the thesis of Zeta that AI is a generational change in technology. The only thing I can compare it to in my lifetime is the rise of the internet. And it may prove historically to be even more significant. It was very clear to me that this was going to be a moment when many new, society-defining, category-defining companies would be created, and where there was the opportunity to shape the future and work with some of the very best entrepreneurs. So that was the turning point that led me to focus exclusively in AI.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn. I love the parallel pathways of thinking about you pioneering these new models at Facebook, and Kay thinking about ethics, and then having you in conversation today. This is fantastic. Heidi, what about you?
I think I fall more under the first category, where my interest in AI and applications of AI came about more as a result of a career evolution. So I'm a technologist. I studied engineering and got my master's and PhD, and I had always been interested in the application of most innovative technologies to address, impactful problems. Initially, I started out in medicine, and then later on into climate tech. With that in mind, similar to Jocelyn, I also had encounters with AI as a student, but focused on computational modeling and other aspects of technology. how I got really into the AI space was more as my experience as an entrepreneur and a founder of an AI startup. We didn't start the company. We didn't found the company thinking that we are going to be an AI startup. It was, to Stanford, D School's credit, we started with user-based, designs and thinking and user feedback, and we were solving a problem that initially after our initial research, user research, we found out that actually AI and machine learning could be the solution, or could be a tool to use for us to address the problem. And that's how really my career in AI started, and I've been focused on it since then, and it's been amazing to see the evolution of the technology over time, and excited to, of course, be part of this discussion as well.
Thank you so much, Heidi. I think a very common theme, even though you all have different pathways into this space, is curiosity, learning, the interest in kind of pushing the boundaries of a conversation and being a part of a next wave of inventing the future. Especially when it comes to tech that's pushing the boundaries of innovation, this mindset of curiosity and learning becomes extremely important to really be able to continuously innovate and bring in new possibilities. And we also know from research that when people are significantly underrepresented in their participation in a field, especially because of the negative societal stereotypes, they often have to prove even more of a learning mindset and the ability to continue through all of the potential feedback or doubts that people may have about their expertise. So can you point to how this learning mindset manifests for you? And do you have specific examples of learning from successes, failures, or unintended outcomes in your work? And I'm going to start with you, Jocelyn.
Oh, gosh. Well, I think maybe it's just my early career as a software engineer. I know full well from the research that a learning mindset is more powerful and more correct and is a self-fulfilling prophecy, and that the fixed mindset also is a vicious cycle of self-fulfilling prophecy too. And I do my best to resist the fixed mindset and embrace the growth mindset, but I'm not always successful. I think what does work for me is to kind of put on my software engineer's hat and just think of problems I come across as issues to debug. And if things don't go my way, if I've missed the mark, if there is a bug, then what am I going to do to solve it? And to sort of be action oriented and I think one of the and I feel like this comes up every day in the course of startups. I mean, the current economic downturn has been rough. A lot of startups that I work with have are sort of finding that customers are slower to make decisions, have reduced their budgets, that is as tough and as much struggle as is in the entrepreneurial journey at all times. It's been a particularly tough time in the last year. And so I would say that the way I apply this every day is kind of rolling up, sitting on the boards of these startups, but really thinking of myself as kind of a part-time extension of the team at the early stage, is just sort of rolling up my sleeves and saying, okay, things did not go the way we wanted, but like, what's the part we do control? Like, we don't control the customer's budget, but we control our own spending. We can live to play another day if we're careful and pragmatic here, and we control our decisions to change a strategy that's not working and not keep putting more effort behind things that aren't working. And so I feel like in some ways, like, the last 6 months has been nothing but debugging across the board, and I think that's true of the startup journey. I mean, when you don't have product market fit, you're kind of constantly, it's like bumper cars. You're bouncing off dead ends and backtracking to try to find the thing that will work. So it's hard to think of a part of my work that isn't like this, actually.
That's a great example, and and definitely, especially in the entrepreneurship space, right? Just how many times you have to do the bumper car thing before you find the right pathway forward.
People have this idea of startups as an overnight success, or just sort of up and to the right the whole way. And the truth is, it's even monstrously successful companies like VMware and Facebook that look from at the outside like a rocket ship that went straight up. so many near-death experiences in the early days, so much struggle. So it's really, you know, the path of entrepreneurship is not an easy one, which is why we should respect entrepreneurs so much.
Absolutely. I definitely had early nonprofit days, so more nonprofit entrepreneurship. And I think one of my first experiences talking to a leadership team was having a question of whether we were going to make payroll. And as a PhD in social science, I was like, wait, what? Like, I'm a part of solving these things? This is so alien to me. And ever since then, I have really always said everything has a business model, and we need to figure out how we're going to support what we do and really problem solve for that. So definitely these experiences are very formative. Leila, what about you?
So I will say clearly this mindset of entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship is really fundamental to innovation. I hope I have that. And it's also the result that my career is not linear. Huh? If you see my CV, I have lots of different projects, but it's completely not linear at all. And I would like also to mention the situation in Europe, or generally the career are really linear in Europe, contrary to US, and the market is also less dynamic than in US. So in general, it's very difficult in Europe to recover from failures, contrary to US. And in Europe, the failures are generally hidden, and also success are shameful in Europe. So, and I think we in Europe we need to learn to be more resilient, and also celebrate each success, even if they are small, and also learn to be more entrepreneur, like in US, of course.
And I see some claps from panelists and members of the audience, right? And so really thinking about how do we foster in different cultural contexts this kind of mindset. And I love Jocelyn's point earlier as well, that you don't either have growth mindset or fixed mindset. We all have context in which we're more likely to have a growth mindset, and context in which we are more likely to show up with a more fixed mindset. And so how do we kind of unlock the right mindset depending on the right cultural forces and industries that we're in. And I love your point about intrapreneurship really being a critical component of this. Large companies, that are in a more mature state of evolution are still creating a lot of new products and technologies that disrupt the field. So not just startups. And it's been fascinating right now to see like the interplay of the startup ecosystem versus the large companies in this whole chat GPT conversation, and just how this is like side by side, the large companies and the startups really competing for market space. Heidi.
Thank you. I would actually like to draw on something that both Jocelyn and Leila mentioned just now, and focus a little bit on a specific learning I would like to highlight. As when it comes to mindset and the learning mindset, it's something that we're not just born with it, and it's not that we just don't have it. It's a practice. So when for the company that I founded, for example, one of our company values was actually continuous learning. So our motto was be better today than you were yesterday. And so by getting that drilled in on a daily, weekly basis, it actually helped to impact how we all thought about the entrepreneurial journey in that. And so coming out of that experience and other aspects of my career, one of my biggest learnings so far has been, especially for female founders, is to develop a mindset to chase the wins and the successes rather than avoiding defeat and failure. So if you want to, as Jocelyn just mentioned, the startup world and the startup experience is all about hearing no's. You get so used to hearing no's that if you go through that path of and that process trying to avoid hearing a no, you would never go anywhere. You would be completely stuck, and you just have to get very comfortable with hearing no's, so that when you do get to a few yeses and a few of the rocks you turn and they turn out to be a yes, that's what you want to be chasing. That's the sort of the high that you bring about by going through this journey. So this mindset has really helped me in my personal growth and being able to not be afraid of the potential for failure, but rather really looking for opportunities for success and chasing those and wanting to bring those about. And that actually, I think hopefully we'll get to touch on this later in the discussion as well. But this is sort of also the mindset that I now apply to AI as a technology, right? And I think we'll talk about that later, but it's shaped my thinking in not just personal career growth, but also how we think of and new new and innovative technology. So in my role currently at German Entrepreneurship, we do get a lot of visitors from Europe and to Silicon Valley. And one of the questions that we often get asked is, what makes Silicon Valley special? And what is it about this place? Is it the infrastructure? Is it, the educational partners who are around? Is it the VCs in Sand Hill Road? And we always try to explain and try to share that from our perspective, it's also a mindset difference. It's a culture of risk aversion versus and failure and being afraid of that in generalizing in Europe and then versus failures being celebrated here in Silicon Valley as experience and as value. So it's been an interesting dynamic to sort of compare the two sides on this.
I love what you're pointing to about the reframe of the metrics of success. I definitely can resonate in trying to get funding for this work. Guess what's hard to get funding for? Research on women's leadership. A lot of talk about it, but funding research on it can be elusive. And once somebody told me, if you're doing fundraising right, your metric of success should be how many no's did you collect this week? And that's what doing this work is. That's the metric of success, because without collecting no's, you cannot get to the yes, right? So I really appreciate you kind of reframing the pursuit of these outcomes. Kay, what about you?
Yeah. So I thought maybe bringing it back to the topic of, how do we get more diversity into AI and women in AI? Just, my own story. I am the daughter of a mother who was in a groundbreaking career many, many years ago, because I'm so old. So I think that, the support of our parents is absolutely crucial to enable women to take the path least trodden. My daughter's an Air Force pilot, and she too needed a lot of encouragement to go into a world where she is one woman in 100 people squadron. And so I think it starts there. For my own, whether it was my mother, I think it was my mother who enabled me to say, you don't have to be in the box that your teachers or society would put you in. And so I think that that's the mindset. I've always wanted to go beyond the confines that society had put in place for me. So when I first went to the bar, there were very few women. Now there are women lawyers everywhere, but there were very few women as barristers at the time that I started. And then, of course, I chose AI as a second career. And lo and behold, there are not enough of us women. So it's that being prepared to push the doors open and not standing for them being closed.
Thank you so much for that analogy. And I love the idea of thinking about breaking gender stereotypes as breaking boxes, because narrow stereotypes and gender stereotypes are very narrow boxes, right? So that's a very powerful call to action. So let's talk about responsible AI, the topic that's certainly generating a lot of conversation right now. Every new technology tends to elicit what social scientists will call the magic bullet interpretation of technology and its impact of society. And this narrative tends to be very, very binary. So some pundits will say, you know, AI will make the world a better place. The possibilities are endless. It's going to be incredible. Others say this is the end of humanity as we know it. And this is not new. It's happened throughout history. You know, I was looking back and and said that the radio, people thought people would stop reading altogether. It was going to be the end of literacy. Others thought the radio would be a force for advancing democracy in the world. Similarly, the telephone, people thought could cure loneliness. Others said, no, it's an incredible threat to privacy, right? So these conversations tend to be somewhat binary. And obviously the answer is yes, and that there's going to be incredible benefit, and we're seeing it in AI already, incredible breakthroughs in medicine, in climate modeling prediction, but we're also clearly seeing unintended consequences and negative outcomes happen. So I want to learn from each of you about how do you go beyond this overly simplistic binary either or thinking, and kind of balance in your own work, maximizing economic growth and societal benefit while identifying and minimizing unintended consequences and harm. And do you think these narratives vary in Europe versus in the US? So I'll start with you, Heidi.
That's a great question, Carolyn. And so, you know, from my perspective, AI, like all the other technologies you just mentioned, has the potential for positive and negative impact. And you know, if I were to have a you know, a magic 8 ball to look in the future with, I would guess that, you know, the society's interactions and perspective on AI is going to follow the laws of physics to some extent, and have a sort of a pendulum type of trajectory. So you know, on one hand, and for a while, we will be pushing the limits of AI technology and what it can do, and you know, the excitement around it. So we will continue to push as far as we can until we start to see you know, negative implications of the use of technology and potential harm that will actually be implicated to society. That will then, I think, result in some resistance, will sort of swing back in the other way, and that's how over time we'll reach this equilibrium for the technology as it goes back and forth between these two extreme states. But what will also happen is that the extremes will actually come closer and closer together over time, and there will be a more accepted approach and set of applications for AI. And so with that, you know, the way that I think about it, and in my current role, I'm very fortunate to be able to work with a lot of really impressive but also pro-technology founders who are specifically working on AI. And you know, I take our role at German Entrepreneurship very seriously, because we are that initial introduction to these founders for them to think about not just the positive impacts of what they're developing and the products they're putting out in the market, but also the potential harm and the potential bias and ethical questions that can also come up. And we are able to bring that awareness, encourage the founders to think about both sides of it, to think about both extremes, and frankly, to prepare them for some of the resistance and the backlash that they may experience depending on which market they're developing their technology in, and also which ones they're expanding their business into. And with that, the sort of stereotypical suggestion and advice that we can provide the founders is that, like any other technology, like any other product, you got to find your early adopters. Those are going to be the part of your market who are going to be your cheerleaders, and they'll continue to push your product forward. And you have to let the others who are potentially more skeptical about the technology and about your solution to come around with time. So start on the people who believe in you first, and then go from there. But also be aware that you may hit some resistance, and you may need to worry about the negative implications of your product as well.
I really like that, because it's also what can you learn from the resistance, seeing it as something to push aside. Jocelyn, what about you continuing on this thread of these conversations in the entrepreneurship space?
Yes, it may come as no surprise that I also think the extremes are flawed. We shouldn't be fatuous. AI has great potential for harm, like any technology, and it likewise is not irredeemable like any technology. It just has to be, it's the humans who have to bring us to sort of safety, not technology in and of itself. I think that there are quite a few types of risks or harms around AI in which there are good business models for solving those problems. If there's risks of hackers using AI to intrude, to steal our data, to find vulnerabilities, then likewise, we can use AI to erect safety nets. And so I think that those types of businesses are already thriving. I mean, that's the good news, is that we can wield technology as a defense against the misuse of technology. And where there's sort of obvious and clear demand and need for that, those businesses are capitalized. Those startups are doing well, they're making money. So capitalism, the market can solve some set of problems. But I think that there are other problems where the person experiencing the harm is not necessarily the buyer of the technology, and we don't have a good kind of market tailwind to bring solutions to bear. And I really do think that in society, it is the role of governments and of policymakers to identify those cases and to create the motivations to manage the risks and harms. And I think a really good example where this is already happening, not in regulation about AI in particular, but when I talk to banks and financial services institutions, insurance companies, a lot of what I hear is, hey, machine learning is really valuable to us. We're using it to predict fraud to great effect. It's really valuable here. It's really valuable in our marketing. We don't use it in some places where we think it would be really helpful and make us a lot more money, because we don't know how to satisfy regulators that our use of it is good. Like, we don't know how to use it to underwrite loans and show regulators that we did it in a fair way. And so that regulation, which is that the loan underwriting decision-making must be fair, is already keeping people from running ahead and using machine learning in a place where it shouldn't be. And what's really interesting is that itself is creating now a viable business model, where I've seen in the last 2 years, probably a dozen or two startups that are getting going with this idea of building technology for responsible AI that tests models, that finds bias, that even can suggest the data to train your model on to improve to solve the problem and yield both a better business result. And now the bank can deploy the model, it can satisfy the regulator, and it can make more money by underwriting more loans and safely, because the model can identify what a human can't. And so the presence of regulation, I think, works hand in hand with the private sector, because now that creates a business model, a positive incentive to build the solutions to the problems. So I think we need more of that. I think we're in the early days, and I think we need many more policymakers and regulators who are more well-educated about AI and its potential harms, to be honest. And I think that's, I'm fundamentally an optimist about this stuff. And I'll tell you why, because to the extent that AI, that we're worried about bias in AI, I think that's true, but that bias doesn't come from the lines of code. The bias comes from the data that the model is trained on, which means that it comes from human beings, okay? Humans are the source of the bias that's in AI. And I find it much more credible and much more tractable to retrain a model with new data, new unbiased data, than to change the mind of a biased human. And so I think we're gonna be able to fix, I think one of the sort of worst excesses, if you sort of trawl around for examples where AI has caused harm and biased models have done a lot of are absolutely inappropriately used. One of the big studies is around parole decision making. And I have no idea why anyone would think that that was an acceptable use for AI in the last 5 years. Like, it's just not a good, like, I actually have no idea how that got past regulators, but it was used and shown to be harmful. And because it was trained on biased decisions of biased judges. And I think it's a lot more likely, though, that that model can be retrained to be unbiased than that we can retrain all those judges that are still, no offense to many unbiased judges out there. And so that does give me some hope.
Yeah, believe me, as a social scientist, 20 years of conversations around bias, I can confirm retraining our brain is not a model that works at all. Leila, what about you? And can you speak to as well the regulatory and conversation in Europe around this?
I have just seen the question about the famous Artificial Intelligence Act in Europe. So, so this question is for me. So Europe is clearly taking a defense stance in innovation in general. So we regulate before innovating, so that we have sometimes full counterproductive situation. So, for example, I'm going to just to mention one example. Just before the Artificial Intelligence Act, Europe decided to suppress privacy shields for American cloud. So it means that we have no possibility to put personal data or sensitive data into American cloud, like Google Cloud, Amazon Cloud. So lots of difficulties to make artificial intelligence without cloud. Difficult. So it means that we need to anonymize or pseudonymize the data before putting them into the cloud. So if you in Europe, with this kind of regulation, it will be a nice opportunity for Europe to create a sovereign cloud provider or create some tools to respect this regulation and the data privacy. But instead of that, we have lots of regulation, and we have lots of American companies to help the European companies to tackle this problem. In fact, the regulation doesn't benefit to European companies, but it benefits to American companies. So, well, it's not really productive for Europe.
Thank you so much, Leila. Some reactions from the audience as well here, which is, when do we, like you said, Jocelyn, like the policymakers have an important role to play, but then how do they do so in a way that doesn't lead to so much red tape that then the innovation ecosystem is harmed? So Kay, definitely want to hear your thinking about this question. This is your area of expertise, and also you are essentially in the policy space and thinking about this from a global perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for that. I saw one question saying, how do we know which companies are doing good with responsible AI? And so one thing I wanted to say is that Miriam Vogel, who's the chair of NIAC in the United States, and I do a podcast each week, or roughly each week, called In AI We Trust, ? And we interview those people who are on the ground day by day by day, trying to get that DNA of responsible AI in their companies. And so, you know, if you want to learn, there's a whole compendium of how to do responsible AI in your company well. And that's whether you're a startup or whether you're a big company. We also at the forum have for the last 5 years been thinking about, you know, nobody really, we think, wants to be that company that is doing irresponsible AI. And we probably want to think about in AI, we want to think about our product in the same way other people think about their product. You know, you don't want to send a car out there that's not fit for purpose. Well, same thing. That's just a different way of talking about responsible AI. So we've created a lot of guides of how to think about responsible AI. And so, you know, they're all out there. One of the things about, again, answering a question about more women in STEM, that would be great, but it takes a heck of a long time. So one thing that we can do in the meantime is when we are creating product teams around something that may be a problem when it's out in the wild using AI, then let's get in the social scientists, let's get in the humanities, the people from the humanities, let's get in the people who are persons of color or women or whatever it is that your product's targeting. There's simply no point in having a group of men under 30 designing an application that is going to be for a woman of my age. You know, you have to bring those diverse type teams together and really tackle it at that point. But also you need the buy-in from the C-suite and the board. So at Davos a couple of weeks ago, I was on a panel with Brad Smith and the CEO of HSBC, you know, really talking about why it is actually something the CEO needs to be thinking about. It's not just all these poor folks who are asking to create algorithms responsibly. You have to build a culture within your company about responsible AI. So those are some things thinking about, you know, companies. We also have to think about countries. So I do a lot of work with policymakers around the world, really helping them to think through how do they design this regulatory framework. And Jocelyn's example of banking is tremendously useful. And so, you know, just sort of thinking a little bit about, you know, what's going on in America. The NIST framework came out at the end of January. That's really helpful. They've been doing a lot of really important work in this space. And I think, you know, we tend to think it's going to be federal government that's going to do something. But actually, if you look at what's going on in the states, you're actually seeing states moving on using AI in HR or using AI in law enforcement, or actually in some states thinking about education and AI. Wouldn't that be wonderful? So yes, I could go on all the rest of the day. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Kate. This is such an incredible conversation, and to think about, like, how do you build this into the DNA of organizations from the beginning of and thinking about the multiple layers of responsibility, right, from founders to policymakers and nation states. And we have a very, very powerful conversation happening in chats with specific examples, promising technology coming out of Europe that can compete with ChatGPT called Emily. And if anybody is interested in following up, so I hope that TAIX is saving the chat as well to continue sharing resources. Before we close the panel, I want to pick up on a question from the audience, which is, what is your call to action to increase the representation of women and the participation of women in AI? Is the idea to include more voices regardless of the state of the pipeline? How do we fix for the long term versus addressing the current state of things? You don't have to come with a whole multi-layered diversity and inclusion strategy. So just a one succinct call to action that you would like participants to take after today's conversation. Leila, you go.
So I would like to address to the woman leader, because I think they are also the part of the problems. So I will say to this woman, with equal qualities, choose to hire a woman also. Don't count on men to create diversity. Be part of the sorority.
Thank you so much. So for everybody across gender identity to be a part of the solution. And in fact, it is a misnomer that a source of misinformation is people think men are doing all the bias. Unfortunately, bias is an equal opportunity bug, as Jocelyn would call it. Women are just as likely to show gender bias as men are. And so I really love your call to action to really build strong alliances to tackle the problem. Jocelyn.
It's really hard to be succinct on this topic, but let me give this. I want to echo Kay's call to employ more social scientists in technology, and I think that actually AI is the solution, not the problem. It's going to take us many decades to get women to 50-50 in computer science degrees, but guess what? Women are already 53% of PhDs, and it's only 25% in math and computer science, but it's 53% of biology. It's 70% of health PhDs. It is over 60% of social sciences. And guess what? I don't know any social science PhDs today that are not studying data science, machine learning, statistics. You don't tell them they're studying computer science. You say, you're getting a PhD in sociology, and by the way, this is how you're going to analyze the data for your thesis. And guess what? You know, my sister-in-law is learning R and Python. So I think that we actually have this incredible overlook. We are about to have a ton of women who aren't carrying a quote unquote STEM degree, who are absolutely capable of being strong data scientists, who can make the pivot from the natural science or the social science that they studied into becoming practicing data scientists, if that's their pleasure. And frankly, I think it would do the tech industry a lot of good to employ data scientists with a social science background, and we can get a twofer there. So I actually think we've got a tremendous opportunity in front of us.
That's a great call to action, because and guess what? We may build a better industry by having a more multidisciplinary set of expertise, right, at the table, and have more innovation come out of it. Kay, what about you?
Oh, I just wanted us to not forget about the rest of the world. When we talk about diversity, you know, and women, there are also a lot of other groups that we are not prioritizing in data science. And also there are 3 billion people still without connection to the internet. So when we're talking about AI and bias and the benefits, there are still so many people around the world who need our help. And they need to be involved in building the AI that is best for their communities as well.
Thank you so much. And somebody from the audience says we need democratizing AI and making sure that no decision maker globally cannot have this AI knowledge. So Heidi, you get the last word.
Excellent. Well, I hope I can have 2 calls to action. The first actually is to the gentleman in the audience and people who are listening. My call to action there is to please talk about this topic, to normalize it. It's in general challenging for minority groups to also be the ones advocating for themselves, and it helps a lot more when when the traditionally majority group speaks about that as well. So let's just normalize the conversation and the discussion around diversity in AI. And to Kay's point, it's not just about women. It's a lot of different groups who are underrepresented. My next call to action is actually for the women in the audience, but also out in the world, interested in AI, already in AI, in leadership. My call to action is to take a look and be aware of the beliefs and the narratives that you may be telling yourself that are holding you back. So do, as much as you can, do an internal audit and see what beliefs and core narratives you've been telling yourself all your life about your role as a woman in AI that's actually holding you back. So be aware of it, and hopefully you can counteract it.
Thank you so much, Heidi. Yes, stereotypes can be internalized as well, right? Society sends us messages, and then we also internalize these narratives. Thomas, I'll turn it over to you to close the panel, and I'd like to thank the amazing panelists today.
So thank you, everybody. I have just a few comments. This was an amazing session. I liked everything that I've heard. This is now almost the 20th session. I have never seen a session with so many emojis flying around. That is an unusual thing. I've never seen this before, which is amazing. Maybe because it's a female kind of a topic, I don't know, but it's awesome. The other one is the ratio from the registrants we have had to the participants has been unbelievably high, which is amazing. So I want to remind everybody, please engage with us on LinkedIn and the conversation in general. This is a series, as Heidi said at the beginning. We have multiple sessions coming. I have a feeling that we may be able to even squeeze in another additional virtual session because of the amount of women we have found who are worth being presented in this particular series. So thank you, everybody. Thanks for the audience in listening into this. And I'm amazed. I loved every moment of it. So thank you very much. You all have a great day and stay safe. Thank you, everybody.